Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Business Brunch, the show that is packed full of CPD and bite-sized chunks over lunch or breakfast or dinner, depending where you are. And we are delighted to be joined today by the fabulous Danny Wareham. For anyone that's watched the show before, you will know Danny well already because he's always on the other side typing in his genius, and we finally got him into the show. So we're delighted to have you on the show, and I'll let Danny introduce himself in just a moment. My name's Sarah Farmer. I'm an executive coach, and I'm joined by my two fabulous co-hosts, Melinda and Vanessa. Do you want to introduce yourselves in just a second? I'll just say we're going to be talking about culture and engagement. Culture isn't fun. Culture isn't real. I don't know. We're going to be talking a lot about culture, aren't we, Danny? We've got lots of questions for you. But let me just go straight over to Melinda, introduce yourself, and then Vanessa, and then we'll come to you and hear about who you are and how people can find you.
Hello, my name is Melinda Ward. I am the Director of Consulting Solutions and Managed Services at Helm 360. My area of speciality is in consulting, of course, as well as business transformation and general management stuffs. I'm also joined by my resident house panther, Alfie, who sometimes pops his head in, and it's just simpler to let him do it. He just wants to steal the spotlight, so there we go. Now over to Vanessa.
Okay, I'm Vanessa Ashworth. I am a marketer. Today, my son is at home sick, so I'm hoping he's not going to join us. He's not sick. There's nothing wrong with him. But no one's interested in who I am. We want to know who you are, and nobody's said hello yet in the comments. So please tell us who you are and where you're calling from. I keep
Yes, you've got that from
What's your name on the screen? Where are you from?
Where you calling from?
Do say hello in the comments and let us know that you're there and that we're not all on our
own. Danny, so tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? What's your name and where do you come from? This is not blind date, but it might as well
my blind date entrance. Afternoon, ladies. It's a real pleasure to be on this side of the screen because obviously I've been a long time lurking fan for quite a while. And for those of you that don't know me, my name's Danny Wareham, and I run an organization called Firgun, which is a Hebrew word that means to take pleasure in other people's accomplishments. And that's kind of what I do. I help organizations to create places where great work is done through culture and engagement, because I get genuine pleasure in creating spaces where people can belong and can contribute safely without a fear of reprimand or ridicule.
God, and we need that at the moment, don't we? We need a lot of that. So you are going to be talking to us today about all things culture. And whilst we're waiting for people to say hello, we're getting some people saying hello now. One of the first questions we'd love to know the answer to is, what is culture and what isn't it? Because people have a view of what it is and what it isn't. But, as the culture guru, how would you describe it? Or should we just
I'm just going to say hello to Ram Nikolai.
So it's a great question because culture can seem quite kind of ambiguous and amorphic and a little bit wishy-washy. And there's lots and lots of different definitions of culture, from things like it's the learned behaviors that help a social group survive, to my favorite, which is it's just how we get things done around here. Mm-hmm. So it's the unwritten rules and practices and rituals and things that happen in a social group that determine what's acceptable. And culture happens in every group. So in your family, for example, in my family, my mum always raised me as you speak when you're spoken to, you wait for people to offer you a drink. Mm-hmm. My partner's family is my casa is your casa. If you want a drink, go and help yourself. If you want to put your feet on the table, feel free, make yourself comfortable. So when I first started dating my partner, it was a little bit weird for me going to their house, and because that's not the culture, that's not the way I kind of get things done around here. And in organizations, you have exactly the ssame sort of thing. It's what are those? How do we really drive?
So they say that you say it's the unwritten rules, and yet a lot of the work I do as a leadership coach is help create not rules but boundaries. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that? Because we've got to have boundaries to be able to sort of push up against. haven't we? We've got to be able to work within something.
Yeah.
So how do you create a culture, but also create a safe boundary for people to go up against and work with?
That's a really good question, because that's pretty much what my work is. So in organizations, the boundaries tend to be set by something that is written. There'll be a set of rules, or there'll be KPIs that we're trying to achieve, which in effect are a boundary or an expectation that's been set. In culture, because the boundaries are unwritten, they're set by tolerances. So what do you tolerate? And this can be things that are bad, that you tolerate. Somebody behaves in a way that is detrimental to the social group, but we just put up with it because it's just Dave, and that's how Dave is. On the flip side, it's also where people do things that are actually acceptable, and it's not recognized, it's not spotted, and it's not reinforced. And in organizations that have those sort of cultures, you end up with a kind of beiging of the experience, both for the employee and for customers, where if I do something good, nobody notices, so why do I even bother? And you very quickly get a kind of a beige magnolia level of service for people that sort of switch off and quiet quit as well.
So just say a few more.
We've got some people joined us.
Yeah, let's say a few more hellos. A few people joined. So Andy is here. He says he's sorry he's late. Great to see Danny up on screen at this side. And Carla says hello. She is a business and marketing student from Glasgow, and she says it's nice to meet us all. It's lovely to see you here, Carla. I don't think we've met you before, so welcome to the Business Brunch. And Ram Nikla, sorry, I don't know how you pronounce your name, but he's from India in Gujarat. So that's lovely to see you here as well. Sorry, carry on.
Okay. So why is a great culture important? I mean, it seems blindingly obvious, but if it was that obvious, everyone would have a great culture, right? But they don't. So why is it important? And what do you think's stopping people from having one?
So first of all, I'm of the belief that there are no such things as a good or a bad culture. So I know people talk about toxicity and terrible places to work and so on, but if you instead of thinking of culture as something that happens in your workplace, something like beanbag furniture and pizza Fridays and well-being days, instead culture is the lubricant that helps deliver your strategy. It helps you get where you're trying to go as a business. So culture is a tool. And in that sense, either your tool works, in which case it's a good culture, or it doesn't, it's a mismatched culture. And if I'll give you a quick example. If you think of an organizational culture that has clear line of responsibilities, clear accountabilities, clear objectives, you do your job and trust everybody else to do theirs, high trust, that's a perfect culture if the task and strategy you're trying to deliver is around crisis management. It's something that's used in the armed forces. But if you have that culture and you put it into somewhere that requires innovation, like Apple, it won't work. On the flip side, you can't have an innovative, try things, fail fast, learn faster culture that you'd want in somewhere like an Apple and put it into the army, because you can't have the soldiers trying new things and failing fast and learning fast, because people die. So those cultures in of themselves are not good or bad. It's just, do they help me deliver my purpose and my strategy, or do they not?
Yeah. So are they purposeful or are they unhelpful? Yes. And they're going to be different wherever you are. I mean, it's a long time since I've been in an organisation other than my own, and obviously the culture here is fabulous. But Melinda, Vanessa, Melinda's currently working in an environment and helps create a culture. So, what are your thoughts on it? What do you do to help create what Danny's talking about?
Well, I think that there's definitely that. It's the interesting point about the difference of culture suiting the company and the purposes of the company. And I think that is something that companies would do well to talk about, because I think there's a lot of assumptions that go on when it comes to company culture, and people just say, oh yeah, we're like one big family, and like that phrase makes me cringe a little bit, because a lot of families are a little bit dysfunctional, and you don't have the same boundaries with a family as you would in work. And another kind of trite or common saying you see in job descriptions, let's say on LinkedIn, is, we work hard and we play hard. And you're just kind of thinking, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm fizzing here because
But people think of that, like if someone says, what is corporate culture? People would say those words, right? And often, like if you go to a company and you say, what's your corporate culture? They'll say, oh yeah, we work hard and we play hard. Woo. And you're just thinking, you don't really understand that, do you? So how can companies start to have that conversation, or how can people start to have that conversation with their companies, or with themselves if they've got their own company, about defining the culture and defining the appropriate culture for the goals that they are trying to achieve?
So there's probably two parts to that to unpack, Melinda. So the first part is culture is something that's built on trust, which is also something that's an emotive subject. So it's controlled by a part of your brain that evolved before language did. It's part of your limbic system. So as a result, you have difficulty trying to explain what culture is. It's like trying to explain why do you love your partner. Your brain kind of runs home and gives perfunctory things like, they're beautiful, they're funny, they're always there for me. Well, lots of people are beautiful and lots of people are funny. You don't love them. So that's not the reason why. So we kind of get hung up on this, how we need to tell people about our culture. You don't need to tell people about your culture any more than you need to tell people that you love them. It's nice to hear. It's a nice artifact, as we say in psychology. But the real proof of the pudding is the small, consistent, authentic things that show that you love someone. It's not the bunch of flowers on the birthday and that's it, any more than it's the award ceremony at the end of the year.
Although we like both of those, just saying.
Yeah, they're nice little extra things, but they would mean nothing and would actually be weaponized against you if the rest of the relationship had no evidence that there was any connection or any authenticity. So the first part around kind of cultural explanation is don't tie up too much on trying to find the right words, because it's really difficult. Instead, find the right behaviors. And those behaviors are because you want to, not because the boss's boss says you have to shake everybody's hand and say thank you for a great day as they go out the office. It's because I wanted to do that because I genuinely care about what you want, and the work we're doing here is meaningful and purposeful.
Sorry to interrupt, but just on that, do you find, because I know I do, is when I'm working with clients within organizations and I say, what are the behaviors that they're having problems within the team? What are the behaviors that you've set as your boundaries? Oh, we don't measure anyone on behaviors. So would you agree that if you don't have a measure of behavior, then there's a good chance your culture is going to be off, probably because nobody really knew where to start in the first place. And there's going to be more Daves. Not that we've got anything wrong with Daves, but there's going to be more Daves that you mentioned earlier that are out of kilter with how we would like to work around here.
Yeah, and everybody knows a Dave. That's why the TV channel, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. The what are the expectations of what will we tolerate, and you can either set those out explicitly in employee handbooks, etc. But then you tend to drive, when there's a disconnect, which I'll talk about in a moment. When there's a disconnect, you then start to get people going, I thought we were a communications company and we can't communicate with each other, and it becomes weaponized against the company. So the first thing is the role model behavior of the leadership team. What's acceptable around here? That sets the precedent, that sets the boundaries that are informal as to how we get things done around here.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily you've got to stick a KPI and measure a behavior, etc. It's more that what you say you're about as a business. If you say you're about customer service, or you say you're about employee well-being, or you say you're about making money for shareholders, there needs to be evidence of that all the way through your organization. And the bigger the disconnect between what you say you do and what you actually do, the more of a mismatch, and more importantly, more toxic your culture will become, because you'll start to get people being asked to behave in ways that are not congruent with their values. And that's where so again, there are no toxic cultures.
Right.
My reaction to it, because you're asking me to do things that I didn't sign up for.
And what would you say are the classics to look out for in a toxic culture? Because we've got Mary Alice. I just want to bring up. I just saw a note from her saying, "Thank you for joining us, by the way." But looking for a new opportunity, culture is key. How can someone like Mary Alice know that the culture is right? What are you looking for? Where are the signs?
So you'll spot a pattern in a lot of my answers that there's two parts. So it really depends. First of all, it depends on what are your needs as an individual. So I'm an idealist, and I like to think that everybody wants a fulfilling role where they're going to make a difference in the world. But the reality is sometimes we just need to pay the bills and there's survival jobs. So if I do the survival jobs, I just need to find a job just to get my foot in the door, first of all. There are things that you can do to make yourself feel more part of that culture and improve your chances of being hired. And there's some really quick basic ones. So for example, scope out the place before you go so you can see how do the people dress. Even if there's not a dress code, there's a dress code and you'll see it in how people have their attire. What kind of language do they use, which you'll get from their job adverts, from their social media feeds, etc. So that when you're positioning your cover letter, you're rewriting your CV, or you're in the interview, you can mimic those behaviors. However, that shows you the challenge with the second piece, that it is easy to try and put on a mask and play the cultural fit game and try and get into a place. If they're serious about culture, there is no culture fit though. You can be yourself. And things that will stick out in their application processes are that you're encouraged more to ask questions, and particularly probing questions around things like, how often do you see your senior leadership team around? How do you deal with conflict within teams? Because we're not going to sit around and sing Kumbaya. We are going to have friction at some point. So how do you deal with that? What's your communications approach? And I don't mean the strategy. I mean what do we get told about? What's the number one burning bridge that we always talk about? Is it recognition? Because you say you're about recognition. So if those two things match, you can feel more comfortable that it's a good culture. If what they say they do and what they actually do. So we're a company that puts our employees' well-being at the heart of everything we do. Okay, but your canteen only sells chips and pies. That it's only a small piece of evidence, but that's one little piece.
So I was just going to say I've had this recently. So I was going through, and Sarah's lived through this pain with me, through an application process with this company. And from the outside, it looked amazing. And the American website, talking about the culture and the values and how it's a great place to work and really supportive, fell in love with this company. The UK arm, very, very different. And their lack of communication throughout was appalling. But one thing that really stood out to me was that the VP of HR sent her emails at 9:00 at night on a Sunday and then on a Tuesday. And I just kind of thought, red flags here.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just like love. If you were to go on a first date with somebody, you wouldn't fall in love with them straight away. I wouldn't expect you to fall in love with them straight away. But if they're selling you a dream of, I've got my own yacht and I do this and I do that, and you've got a feeling in your gut, which is really your limbic system, going, something's not quite right here. That disconnect is the same with culture. So yes, their website's fantastic and says they're all about employees, but when you get there, I was working with a client that was all about precision. So an engineering company, they're all about precision. So I did some research on the company before I went in for the client pitch, and they turned up to the meeting 8 minutes late. Oof. So straight away, as those little things go, are we about precision? And the bigger those disconnects and the more evidence there is of it, the more that gut feel of it's not really for me starts to kick in.
Absolutely. So Andy says, this is really interesting, Danny. It's clearly you have huge and fundamental knowledge. He then goes on to say that this is a big topic for him. He's about to grow a team from scratch later this year. So he's really keen to learn whatever he can.
Fantastic.
And just to this constant barrage that's coming in, can't help you, very sorry, but thanks for joining the show. No, we can't give you any suggestions either. Do apologise. Not the right show for that. That's thrown me completely.
Well, I've got something interesting.
We can talk about Pizza Fridays if you want.
Oh, yes, I do know what it was. Vanessa, you go first and I'll come back to it.
Okay, just really quickly. all about culture, because we started, didn't we? We had International Women's Day and we said, what's the point? And we talked about if people aren't actually taking action, then we were wasting our time. And then last week we talked about how you can take action, not necessarily about diversity or equity, but taking action in general. We barely touched it. And now we're talking about culture and engagement. And I think a really important part of creating a culture is to have diversity. And it happened to me this week with Rivington, and I'm on various committees and boards doing different things. And what came back from one of the committees was we need to get out of this what we can. We need to take them for all their worth. And I realized they need diversity on their committee, because I had to kind of step in to stop it and say, well, can we just remember that this person is a partner? It's a business. We've both got to support each other. Then we all thrive and we grow together. They were taking a very hard view on it, which to me said they need diversity on their committee to create that more understanding.
Yeah, that add the balance a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So go on, give us I know we're kind of running out of time, but yeah.
It's fine, because it's probably the most important part of what I do is not diversity, but inclusion. So the reason I say that is that diversity we tend to think of in terms of protected characteristics, whereas actually diversity is in all of its forms. But there is no diversity if the environment doesn't allow you to say, hang on a second, I don't agree with that, or I've got an idea, or I need some help. So diversity for me is the output of inclusion. So our focus is around how do we often get out of our own way, particularly in commercial corporate environments where extroversion has historically been seen as a strength. So suddenly the loudest people in the room dominate the airtime, and you miss out from just the cognitive diversity that people that are introverted bring to, they tend to have much better views around risk than people that are extrovert, and you've just told them to shut up. So how do you create the environment that allows everybody to contribute without fear of ridicule or reprimand, so that you're able to say, hang on a second, they are a partner, and maybe we shouldn't be shooting ourselves in the foot.
It requires a huge amount of emotional self-control, doesn't it, to be able to do that? A lot of the work I do is around helping people understand themselves better first before they can lead others. They've got to lead themselves. So to be inclusive, to allow diversity to be, part of your world, you'd really have to manage your own bias, and not enough leaders, in fact, very few, learn how to do what Vanessa did in that meeting, where she could recognize straight away these people aren't thinking in a diverse fashion. They're being biased by their own desires, needs, angst, whatever it was, and she could step in so they could stand out. Just sort of step in, to give them that thought, because she does know how to think diversely. And manage her own emotions towards things. So there's a big gap there. But sorry, Melinda, I cut into you.
No, I was just going to ask Danny about if there were some kind of approaches and tips that everybody can do. Like, either obviously management can encourage participation from everybody, but how can an individual help to promote that sort of culture, positive culture in their sort of everyday workings? Is there a way that we can kind of encourage people collectively to pull more in alignment with where we want to go?
And again, a good point. And it's not so much a positive culture as a purposeful culture.
Yeah.
So purpose starts with why we're here, what we're trying to achieve. And one of the biggest challenges around employee engagement is we think of engagement as being fun stuff. Let's have a party, let's have beanbag furniture, let's have pizza Fridays. What employee engagement is really is how do you engage your employees in the strategy? How do you change it from a place that is a great place to work to a place where great work is done? So culture in itself is not fun and engage in its own right for its own sake. That's a commune. That's people come in and clap and enjoy each other's company, and then it's empty. On the flip side, strategy is quite boring. Hiking your way to the mountain, well, I don't want to do that again. It was a pain in the backside. So you need both. So my first piece of advice would be, ignore the shiny.
Mhm.
So too often we can go, that's a great idea. They've got a new comms platform, or they've got a slide in the office, or they let the dogs in or we've got uniforms, or whatever it is. I'm not saying those things aren't great, but the first check and balance should be, do they help us achieve what our strategy is?
Yeah.
If your strategy would benefit from Pizza Fridays, do it. Do as much as you can. But don't start with the novelty, the quirky, and the let's copy somebody else, because you can't copy somebody else's relationship. That's not how it works. Your relationship is unique to you.
And isn't it true that people often try and put a band-aid over the culture gap? So they'll put a plaster over it, and they won't look at the gaping wound underneath and realize what the real problem is. So by putting in, oh, we'll get Pizza Friday or fruit on Friday or whatever it is, you're not actually solving the real problem, because the real problem is usually a lot deeper. People aren't feeling psychologically safe. They don't understand what they're doing or why. They're not as involved. They're not being rewarded or recognized as well. So these are the gaping wounds that we both see in our roles, different lenses on. And then they put this little band-aid over it going, it'll be all right, let's have cake.
And the band-aid is the shiny.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that there's almost like a tipping point where an organization doesn't have that psychological safety and doesn't allow for people to say, I don't agree, etc. Then that doesn't just apply to people on the front line, that applies throughout the organization. So you have senior leaders that are afraid to put their head above the parapet. They're afraid to say, well, actually, maybe it's us that's the problem, or maybe it's the processes and policies and structures that we've put in place that are the problem, because nobody likes to be told their baby's ugly.
Yeah.
So instead,
the ugly babies out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and that's such a problem with people in consulting type roles who are brought in to help. I mean, it doesn't matter what industry, you're brought in to help, but then
what's that?
help
Fire.
It's funny what you said about the gaping holes and then the Pizza Friday. I think probably one of my first jobs, we did Pizza Fridays, but it was with one specific aim in mind, and that was to have a kind of off record, say what you like. And we were a small team, and it was a case of question strategy, question each other. And it was a kind of a safe space to have those conversations. And so the Pizza Friday was just the mechanism to make it really informal and make people relaxed, so we could have difficult conversations. But but it was a communication tool.
It's a fantastic tool, because it's out of the ordinary. It's a pattern interrupt as well. It helps say that this isn't the norm. It is a safe space. I really like that.
But it was to deliver strategy. It was to help smooth strategy. So it was strategic. Yeah.
And I'm sure to gather ideas as well, because I'm sure some points came out of that which could be fed into the overall corporate strategy. Like, oh, hey, I've heard some clients say this and that, or I've had this feedback, but I didn't quite know how to raise it. So, that sort of feedback is really important, but a lot of times is lost because, I don't want to tell my boss this because maybe then I'll look like I screwed up or something like that. And I don't want that to affect my bonus or whatever.
It's an indicator of the culture in its own right.
Yeah. I saw a post from Leah Turner this morning, who, for anyone that's on LinkedIn, she's prolific on LinkedIn and very well known, talking about your LinkedIn strategy isn't what your company says it is, it's what you think it is. You want to be able to talk about it. Those weren't her exact words, but I commented straight back, exactly that you've got to feel able to say what you think about the company and what you're doing without fear of being told off or put in a box. Culture, isn't it? It's all down to culture.
You can't tell us what your culture is. Your people show us.
Yeah. What a great way to finish that. Exactly.
Time has gone so fast.
Time has gone. Danny, thank you so much for joining us. We could talk for ages. There's so much more inside that amazing head. So we will get you back. It's only taken us a year and a half to get you in, but we'll get you back. But good luck with the rest of your. What do you finish off your thesis now?
Yeah, so my thesis, which is around a new type of leadership. So
cool, come on.
So in the past, leadership has always been a person, and followers. And the argument's been, is it because of traits? Is it because of the situation? Is it because of relationship? My idea is that the environment, the culture, is the leader. And if that allows anyone to step in and take the leadership role based on the situation and context. So that's what I'm researching at the moment.
Excellent. And on that point, of course, leadership is going to be the topic next week, isn't it, Sarah?
Definitely.
So I know I haven't mentioned it much, but my book, Leader Unleashed, is going to be available to buy and consume by all human beings on the 28th. So on the 27th, which is the next show, I think we'll be talking all things Leader Unleashed, right?
We will.
Yes.
We will.
So
But
come
just
in and find out a bit
before
more about that.
before we go, so Leader Unleashed, Sarah's book launch next week. But Danny, Andy asks, where can we read your work? Where can we find out more about this?
So it's not published, but that is a medium-term goal. Provided my research doesn't say, Danny, you're shoveling it with both hands.
Read my book, you'll get over that.
But Andy, if you fancy a chat about it, by all means, there's a calendar in my profile. Drop us in, we'll grab a brew together.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much, Danny. It's been
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. We really appreciate being here.
We'll see you all next week. Have a great rest of your week. And go be awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.